Welcome to the Fat Fueled Family Podcast, where every week we talk about things like nutrition, training,
how to live a healthy and active lifestyle with your little ones, peaceful parenting, education,
and of course, mindset.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Keto Counterculture, at Fat Fueled Mom, and at Fat Fueled Kids, and search for Fat Fueled Family on YouTube.
To stay up to date with everything we're doing, sign up with your email at www.fatfueled.family and check out our blog for workouts, meal ideas, and all the other cool stuff we love to talk about.
Don't forget to hit subscribe.
All right, welcome to the Fat Fuel Family Podcast. This is Danny Vega, and I'm joined by my beautiful wife.
Are you just waiting for me to... You're not going to say my name?
I wanted you to
Maura.
Yeah, because I always introduce you, so I feel like you should introduce yourself.
You didn't even give me a heads up, so how am I supposed to know?
Well, we're married. We need to have this communication. We need to have that level.
I usually finish your sentences. It's me, guys. It's me.
So we are super excited because we have our friend Anthony J here. Dr. J earned a BA with a double major in biology and theology from Ave Maria University in Naples, Florida, just 2 hours south of us, where he researched HIV inhibitors. And then after college, he continued to work on with virus in the context of Alzheimer's disease for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. And then he earned his Ph.D. in biochemistry from Boston University School of Medicine, researching fats, hormones, and cholesterol. He currently lives in Rochester, Minnesota, and he's at the Mayo Clinic researching stem cells and epigenetics. I was at the gym with him when we first met, and we went down like a 30 to 40 minute rabbit hole, and I forgot that I had to record a podcast. That's how engaging this stuff is. But, you know, in addition to leading his consulting company, AJCCo, Anthony J Consulting, he's a bestselling author of Estrogeneration, which many of you may recognize as the book that ruined all of our lives.
I'm like, it's the worst news ever. It's so good.
So yeah, we're super excited to have him on. Say what's up, Dr. J.
Hey guys, thanks for the awesome intro.
Yeah, we really do. We tell everyone, we're like, you know, we're always sharing about it.
I know people will tag me and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're like, I'm reading the book, and they're all excited.
They're so excited. I'm like, don't get that excited, because like, yeah, you're gonna be so depressed.
It's you know, the truth will set you free, but first it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
It's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is too is people just hadn't. I mean, the reason I wrote the book is I hadn't heard of a lot of that stuff. You know, nobody's out there talking about it.
Yeah.
So I felt like it had to be said. Like some of this stuff had to be compiled, because it's not just BPA that's bad. It's not just phthalates that are bad. You know, it's not just parabens. It's the cumulative effect of all of those things. They're all acting because they're acting in the same way on your estrogen receptors. You know.
Yeah, and
that's
then
a bigger
I
issue.
love
It gets underestimated.
It is, and the systematic approach that you took, and you looked at every single thing and every single way, and like the way the epigenetics, that was probably the biggest eye opener for me, because you know you talked about I forget which fish that were these lake fish that were exposed to, you know, for a short period of time, and it was like 2 generations after, still showing the changes.
I know, and then you can't do those studies in humans, you know. So it's concerning.
Concerning.
But we kind of are.
Well, we are kind of doing one massive study.
And I tell people, I really do think, you know, that it's a realistic scenario to be in, you know, at some point in history, in a situation where we're terrified that we're not going to continue as a species because we've made ourselves infertile.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a legitimate concern. Scientists are talking about that. And I mean, I don't go that far, you know, myself, because there's people like us. Yeah,
exactly.
That care.
And our kids, thankfully.
But you know, like just a couple days ago, I was doing a DNA consult with somebody whose dad was exposed to Agent Orange. And I was talking to the daughter, and she's got all kinds of health impacts from her dad being exposed.
Wow.
You know, and I think that happens a lot more than people realize. Without the Agent Orange, just from the other chemicals that we're exposed to, more regular, and the chemicals are legal, you know?
Yeah. And I wanna get to our first question, but you kind of brought something up that Maura and I have spoken about to each other, and we think that how important is it for someone to get genetic testing at a very early age? Do you think it gives us enough information?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot that you can get from it. There's two components, right? There's genetic and then there's epigenetic. And in the future, we're going to have both of those pieces of the puzzle. But for now, the genetics is within reach financially for most people. And, the younger ages, for me, it's about how capable are you of spitting in a tube?
Yeah. That's an issue that we've had with our 4-year-old because
Well, I originally ordered the 23andMe for Dean.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how much spit was involved.
Yeah.
So I just did it myself. Yeah. However, I have a friend that told me but you see, I don't know if you need that much spit because I have a friend who told me that there's like a PharmD that she knows that's not even doing that anymore because she doesn't agree with it. And she's doing like this genetic testing for people and it's just a swab. But I don't know.
Yeah, you can do it that way.
Oh, okay.
23andMe won't let you do that.
Yeah, 23andMe won't let you, but...
Right. And they don't technically need all of that spit that they want in that tube. But I have had people, they come to me with their 23andMe results and there's a lot of data that's missing because either they left it out in the heat or they shipped it when it was like 100 degrees or something, and probably there's a lot of degradation, or they didn't fill up the tube.
I'm surprised they
it's always a risk.
Because I would think that 23andMe would want a control for that, and because they told Maura that.
Well, there's a liquid on top supposedly that
when you
finish, you like shake it up or something. It's supposed to help that, but I'm sure you can't prevent.
No, and it does for the most part, but every once in a while I get somebody who's got quite degraded DNA, and I'm surprised. I'm exactly what you said. I'm surprised 23andMe will let that happen, and maybe it's just a total outlier. Maybe it's something else going on.
This is why I would never, ever, and I've been in these labs. Biology I'm sorry to all my biologist friends, but it just seems like the most
I didn't like biology lab. I liked
thing ever. Just sitting there all day, spinning things around, and it's really just quality control is the most important thing. I feel like.
Yeah, attention to detail, no social life, all the above.
Yeah. So, all right.
Yeah, man. Well, speaking of science, ask your question. And
no. I
want to make this announcement.
Yeah,
it's probably related to the announcement, or the question could be related to the announcement.
I think I want to hear the announcement because we're really excited that you wanted to announce it on our show. So we have to do that first.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you don't know about this, Maura.
This is news to me.
Yeah. I know. Also, I'm setting up this neat crowdsourcing experiment, and it has to do with the carnivore diet. So I want people to participate. It's crowdsourced. It's just anybody can join. The only trick is probably people like you can't join, because if you're already a carnivore, it doesn't work. But what I want to find people that maybe they're on the fence about trying the carnivore diet. They've never tried it. They're total omnivore. And you want to give it a full 90-day trial. So what I'm going to have people do is buy this test. It's called telomeres, and that's TELOYEARS. And it measures your telomere length, which there's a lot of interesting data I can get from that. And you do that just before you start the carnivore diet. You buy this 2-part test. It's $160. They call it Now and Later is the name of the test, because they basically just send you 2 kits. And you take your telomere test just before you start the carnivore diet. You do the carnivore diet for 90 days, and then you retake the telomere test on the 90th day, and you send me that data. And
amazing.
I want people to be super strict about the carnivore diet, and I don't even want them eating birds like chicken and white meat like pork. I just want red meat. Super fatty cuts are awesome. Have as many of those as you want. And the only other thing is water and salt. Red meat, coffee, water, and salt. That's all I want people to eat on this one, because I think that'll give me the most interesting result.
Absolutely.
And, that's what I'm looking for. I want to see the differences, and I want to control as many variables as I can. Now, what would really be cool, that's basically the announcement. That's basically the experiment. And people will send me an email. You can email me at aj@ajcco.com and just say, hey, I'm interested in this. And I'll send you an email with information. But what I also, I mean, so the telomeres test is necessary, and so is not cheating on the diet.
Yeah.
And not
But
cheating,
also,
right?
yeah. And if you happen to cheat, just recuse yourself, take yourself out of the study, because that could mess up my result. But, no judgment, right? If you want to cheat, that's okay. Just pull yourself out of the study.
Yeah, it's important to be honest, for sure, because we've had other crowdsourced meat experiments, and we've seen how, we've seen where it says, okay, if you do cheat or you do have something, make a note of it. But then at the end of the day, the discussion is going to come up, and when we start talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the study, that's going to be a big weakness, because it fudges the information.
Yeah. And I think we'll get enough people, because I've got guys like Chris Bell I've been working with. I'm going to fly out and talk to him, and he's going to promote with me, and Sean Baker's going to help out. In fact, I was going to do this as a 30-day experiment, but Sean Baker said, no, it's got to be 90.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
30, I agree.
I agree too, because, that first
month is honestly rough.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
And there's a lot of GI stuff that occurs that you have to kind of get through it, and it lasts a while. So I agree. I would have said the least would be 8 weeks or something.
Yeah, at the very least.
Yeah.
Now,
and I mean, if you really want a gold star, what I want people to do is take their blood as well before they test, and then at 90 days, and preferably even in the middle at 30 days. That's what I'm going to tell people in the email. I want to see blood work. But that's not super necessary. The most important thing is telomeres. I really want to get that as a publication in a professional science journal. And so we at least have something to reference and some knowledge on this topic. That's amazing. I think it's going to be real anti-inflammatory, and there's going to be a lot of interesting things. It's going to lead to interesting results.
Yeah, and so I'm really intrigued by the choice of, being that you're an epigeneticist and, you're choosing telomeres, and I don't think anyone has looked at that. And
no.
We've seen the ketogenic diets now. They've talked about it. I haven't seen, even in a ketogenic diet, well, it probably has to have been studied as a primary endpoint if they're referencing the fact that it does lengthen your telomeres with the ketogenic diet. Well, the
difficulty with keto is, the nice thing is, let me flip that around. The beauty of the carnivore diet is red meat, water, and salt. That's it.
Yeah.
The keto diet could be avocados, it could be olive oil, it could be animal fats. There's a lot of different variables, and I feel like with this, I can control it, and I'm just personally interested in it because I'm not seeing any data. And there's some telomere research with keto stuff, but honestly, there's not enough there either.
It's probably at this point mechanistic, right? Just talking about the possible mechanisms of action that would lead to that.
Yep, exactly. Or just a few cells in a dish, where they're testing the telomeres.
Gotcha.
But so that study needs to be done too, I think. But we'll start with the carnivore.
Yeah,
honestly, I want to see people do the grass-fed free range cows. They don't absolutely have to, but I'd prefer that they buy a whole cow or something from a farmer, or just get good quality grass-fed beef.
I would rather a 10 to 20 person sample with information like that.
Yeah.
I really would prefer.
And I'll know the difference, right? I'll be able to distinguish. People send me an email and say, "Hey, I had 100% grass-fed organic free range," and then some people say, "Hey, I didn't," and I'll be able to separate those groups. That's a small variable,
And that
as opposed to I ate chicken, that would be super interesting. And I mean, I'm sure it does matter, because that's one of the things I research, with atrazine and the grains and all this other stuff. But whether the telomeres are going to pick that up, I'm not sure. But the blood test might, and so we'll, like I say, that's not a mandatory thing, but I want to know, and I want to encourage people to do the grass-fed free range. Yeah.
And I asked you about this in passing, but I wanted to ask you again, because, you're reminding me of so many things that we think about. And, the one thing that I was telling people was, I think I kind of mentioned this to you when you were here in Tampa, about there's people that are concerned with, the price of grass-fed meat. And, we can argue about how it's when you're only buying one thing, first of all, it's really not that expensive. But let's say it is. I was saying that, to me, at the very minimum, being organic would technically
Or hormone free.
Or organic would be hormone free, right?
It would be.
I think that's part of organic. But if I were to say organic, wouldn't that at least mitigate most of the issues that we see? Because if it's organic, the feed is not getting sprayed with atrazine.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, good. So that's good to know. So buy organic at the very least, people.
But you know what? You can honestly find like, okay, you're probably not going to, if you can't afford it, you're not going to be able to have like grass-fed ribeyes every day. But you can do grass-fed ground beef, honestly, is pretty cheap to find at Sprouts. It's been driven down a lot now. So you can find like grass-fed ground beef pretty. Well, and like I said, I mean, I checked into it because you guys were asking me when we were talking in person about how much I paid for my cow.
Oh, yeah.
And, now, again, I'm in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota,
right?
And I used to raise cows because I homeschooled, and my dad was a medical doctor actually, but he bought some real estate out in the country, and I fenced it in and bought a bunch of cows.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I know
great for
farmers. Yeah, well, I'm plugged in, and so my cow that I bought was $1,400 for the whole thing butchered.
For how many pounds?
The whole cow. I don't know. It was a full size
maybe
cow.
Like 800, 700-800.
It's like 2 chest freezers full.
Well, it's definitely gonna be like $2 to $3 a pound.
That's much cheaper. It's like half.
That is unreal,
yeah,
and that's
cheap,
pretty comparable.
But it's because I know the farmers, right? It's a homeschooling friend. I know the butcher.
Right.
I made him wrap it in. I told him, hey, I want this wrapped in, not plastic. Not plastic.
Yeah.
What am I trying? Wax paper, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
With
I was going to say, what do you do?
Either.
Okay, so they do wax paper.
Yeah, that's so important. And the wax paper is so much better for the meat too.
Yeah,
beyond just
butcher
protecting
paper
from plastic. Yeah,
I know. You don't realize how much stuff has plastic until you actually try to get rid of it, and you're like, goodness gracious.
Yeah, Ben,
what about
the other
this?
day,
what about this?
I said something like, Dr. J said that if you're gonna put on cologne, put it on your t-shirt, and I was like, and I wanted to put some cologne on. He's like, and Ben's like, yeah, but you still smelled the cologne. I'm like,
I know.
Dang it!
You still
not perfect, but at least it's not blasting through your skin.
Yeah, exactly.
So
oh man.
Fume
levels and skin absorption levels.
Well, today I went to the gym and I forgot my stainless steel water bottle, and so you know how it's so painful to like buy something that's bad for you? Like you're like, I have to drink this plastic water now. Yeah. I have no choice. But then I went in the sauna and tried to make up for it with an extra 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to stay 30 minutes in the sauna today.
Yeah.
To get all this crap out.
She cooked some sweet potatoes and she's like, the sweet potato tasted, because I think you had to microwave it or something. It
tasted like cancer.
And literally. Then I was like, you must have gotten a piece of aluminum from the sheet.
Well, yeah, because the microwave was going crazy, so I must have.
And I was like, great. Well, just go longer in the sauna.
He's like, just go in the sauna.
Yeah. Well, I just want to know what cancer tastes like.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it tasted like what you would think. Like, when the microwave, when you put something like aluminum and it like almost blows up. Like that's what it tasted like. Like if that had a taste, gross. That's what it tasted like. Like burnt aluminum. Burnt aluminum is a good one. Oh, like the sweet potato tasted like the way it smells. Exactly. And I was like, oh, for sure, I can't eat this. This is really bad. Bite, though, so I took one bite and then I threw the rest out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think that's a great segue. When we talk about such big problems, we wanted to ask you, what is the most critical problem you're currently working on?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different facets to my life, right? Because I'm in the lab. I'm doing research at the Mayo Clinic. I've got 4 kids, wow. and we're homeschooling, and that's keeping me busy, and my wife a lot busier. So, and then, of course, I'm trying to do other things like my DNA consulting I do every day, and I'm trying to write books. So I think for me, it's a lot of work-life balance. And, at the end of the day, I just have to work a lot more than most people. So that's probably the biggest challenge right now, is just trying to juggle all of these different things. But the good news is I enjoy it, like I don't have any problem with it. I'm not, if I did, I probably would just cut one or the other out. But
that's good. And the work-life balance, it really is hard for us because, I'm going to say this as a man, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, so I can't comment on women. But as a man, I feel every single morning I wake up and I feel like I need to generate income, I need to provide.
Yeah, so it's
and so, you know, what ends up happening is if you're not mindful, your relationships suffer, you know, but obviously this is something that you're focusing on. And myself too, I told my son yesterday, you know, he doesn't know what I'm thinking, and he doesn't feel like I'm not spending enough time, but I feel like I'm not spending enough time. So I said, I'm going to turn off my phone at 8:00, and I'm going to try to drive that number down earlier. But I will turn off my phone at 8 p.m. every single night. You know, we'll work on getting that time earlier, and he's like, okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah. They don't even.
Nice. Yeah. So no, I mean, and leading by example with the kids is the most important thing. And it ties into everything, right? Because if the children see that you're passionate about what you're doing and you're working hard, that's good. But then also you need to have the time where you just focus completely on them. So be present. That's good. You know, there's a lot there. And I think that the modern culture makes it so difficult because now both parents almost have to work, you know?
Yeah.
The way our culture is set up because that's how everybody's doing it. So then everything is at that price range where it's assumed that, you know, if you've got kids, both parents have to work to keep it, you know, everything afloat. And that puts a lot of pressure on somebody like me because my wife stays home and I make that a huge priority.
You just said something that I honestly it's kind of controversial, but I'm going to say it anyways because we've said this before, and now I can honestly say it as someone who's living it. Because before, you know, when I was working for a huge company, making really good money as a medical device rep, I used to say, this is a lifestyle choice. You know, choosing to homeschool our kids is a lifestyle choice. Yeah. And so if I made half of what I make now,
I would still homeschool.
And right now I'm not even at half. So
nice.
So I'm officially it is a lifestyle choice, you know. This is you know, what are your priorities? Yeah, it's a sacrifice.
It is a sacrifice,
absolutely. And definitely not, it's not 100% for everybody. Like there's definitely situations where people can't do it. I understand that.
Of course.
But there's so many people that probably should be doing it that just are afraid. A lot of people are afraid because they want to compete. You know, it's the gods of the ACT and the gods of the SAT, you know,
I know,
that they're trying to worship in the school systems. And so there's a pressure to conform. And like personally, I think like I read a really cool book, probably never heard of it because it's such an obscure book, but it's called The Underground History of American Education.
By John Taylor Gatto?
Oh, yeah.
That's our hero.
We've heard of
That's
it.
our hero, man.
That's my hero.
We love him.
Literally my hero.
See, I thought I was just going to have to explain.
Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Oh, no, we're part of the cult as well. We're in the cult.
Yeah,
that is so cool, man.
He's so good.
When I read that book a bunch of years ago, before I even had kids, I was kind of thinking about this. Because, so let me just tell you first. So I grew up in a private school, and then I did the public school, and then I did the homeschool. I started homeschooling. My family, I've got 3 brothers and 1 sister. My parents just decided to homeschool all of us at the same time. And I was in 7th grade at the time.
What a
and
shock.
Honestly, I hated it.
I would have loved that, though.
I didn't like
you hated it, you said?
Yeah, I hated it. I was bitter about it. I was angry because I was playing hockey at the time. I was the team captain. I had a whole set of friends. This whole, the whole thing. I was cool. I was the jock. At least I thought I was. But it was such a shift, to do the homeschool thing, and I didn't like it. But then what really tipped the scale for me was we met this homeschooling group. We started going skiing. We got a season pass at a ski place, which in Florida you can't do, but you know what I mean? Like there's comparable things that you can do, like rock climbing or whatever.
Or like you get involved with a group of people that take the same fishing charter or something, or just a fishing. In Miami, growing up with my parents, like we went fishing with the same people if we went fishing with others. Yeah, that would be even more fun, I would think. But for me, but yeah, no, exactly. So I met this homeschooling group, and it slowly changed me within the course of about 2 years to recognizing, boy, there's a huge difference between these people that homeschool. And there was about 50 families in that homeschooling group, which is awesome for it's a big
middle of nowhere in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
And just the difference between those people and the people that I had hung out with playing hockey. And even now, it's even more dramatic now because I can look back on Facebook and say, ooh, like that guy's in prison, literally.
Literally.
And what would you say were the biggest differences? Because I'd like people to know, you know, kind of your perception as a child at the time.
Well, let me go back to the underground history, right? Because I bought that book.
Oh, yeah.
And and I read it, and I literally bought like 5 or 6 copies, and I was passing them out like candy because I was like, man, people got to realize it. I had no idea.
Trick or treat, here's a book.
Because it's just that knowledge I'd never been told. And
he is so smart.
Yeah, the whole idea is that the Prussians developed this military system.
Yes, we've talked about this.
Yes, the Prussians.
So funny.
And then the
General
Education Board, when the General Education Board, that first meeting, it's like, it's so obvious. But let's assume our listeners don't know.
Okay, yeah, go.
What did you say?
I was saying let's assume our listeners don't know because a lot of people
they don't.
Well, so the Prussians were this, around Austria, and they wanted to develop this military education system. And so what they did is they looked back to Sparta, which is, of course, was a military, I don't want to say community, but a military culture. Way back. And the Spartans, like one of their strategies was to take the kids away from the parents, take them out of the homes as young as they could.
As soon as possible.
Train them, not educate them, but just train them. And basically develop a group of a community of, boys in the case of Sparta, but basically people that do what they're told. They don't think for themselves. Right. You don't want somebody to think for themselves. That's a liability. And so, and that's what I noticed, right? You asked me what the biggest difference is when I started meeting these homeschoolers, is they thought for themselves and they really pursued what they were interested in, and they actually loved what they were doing, as opposed to my public school buddies back in playing hockey. They just kind of suffered through it, sucked it up, hated classes, but they loved the hockey, right? And that sort of thing. But
you just do what you're told.
I'm sorry?
You just do what you're told, though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the system is so set up. Like, I didn't realize the whole raising the hand thing was developed by the Prussians. And
it's so bad. Once you look into it, it's so bad.
I know. Well, even the grade levels, right? Like getting your little stamp of approval and moving on to the next level and the next level, and just kind of staying in this conveyor belt where you just kind of move along and get your little stamps. And I mean, it's literally designed to just eat up all your time. That's by design. And anyways, It was so enlightening for me. And so it's funny when people today, when they say that the education system doesn't work,
we're like, right? We're
like, it actually works, though. No, but it works. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it does exactly what it's designed to do.
It does work.
So it works. And people
It is working.
People, I kind of collect. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, as you know, and I read a lot, and I kind of collect. It's just a hobby. I have like little audio clips where people complain about education. like for example.
Oh my gosh, you have to compile like all of those.
That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, eventually, because it's so interesting to me when I hear people like Steve Jobs, or when I hear people like, what's the guy that was like the early investor in Twitter, lives out in Montana. Huge, that guy, huge venture capital.
He's a dropout too, probably. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He went to law school, but
Bill Gates is also a dropout.
Yeah.
So our country is literally run by.
Well, and exactly, and so many of them complain.
And bad students.
They all recognize it, right? Joe Rogan, like all these guys, they're always recognizing and talking about how bad the education system is, and we all know it. But the difficulty is the solution, right? Because the education system works exactly how it's designed to work.
Yeah.
And it, like, basically you learn what to think and you spit back answers. That's the whole process. You just constantly are being told what to think and spit back the answers on an exam, as opposed to how to think, the process of thinking. And we don't even give that a second thought in the education system. And that's my difficulty with it, as I've started to think more about, homeschooling versus the system. Because a lot of people, when they homeschool, they just try and do what the public school system does, except they try and do it better.
Right.
So then,
we talk
they're
about that
replicating
too.
School at home, right?
Yeah, and we don't want to do that. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the number one handicap in our own education is when we try and homeschool is our own education, right? That's the number one handicap.
Deschooling yourself.
So ingrained from a few generations already that yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the whole unschooling movement developed. But what was funny about the underground history book by John Taylor Gatto is he's it's probably like Estrogeneration, right? Like my book, it's pretty gloomy.
Yeah.
You kind of read it and you're like, man, that's bad.
You can't unhear. You can't unhear
and
that.
I love that it sounds so conspiratorial, but the best part about it is how
he's a teacher, and he was a teacher.
Referenced it is, too.
It's well referenced, and he was a teacher. He had the inside.
Well, and the only problem with it is he doesn't really give you any solutions. Whereas at least I feel like with my book, I tried to give people solutions and say, here's what you do.
You got some plans.
Where's my gold plan for education? Where's my bronze plan?
Well, and
where's my
and have you heard of Oliver DeMille? Oliver DeMille is another really interesting book. He wrote a book called...
I think I just saw a clip that he was on, like a 1 minute clip someone posted on Instagram.
Interesting.
About him talking. He was talking about and then I realized that, that he just was, he realized how absurd the whole thing was.
Yeah.
And how, okay, what does it matter? I really wanted to play the trumpet, or let's say, and I took time away from the trumpet to learn algebra.
That I forgot.
Here I am now doing what I love. Right. Like the algebra could have waited.
Yeah.
and also you forget it, so it's not like it actually stays there.
Yeah.
Where you're like, at least I know algebra now. No, you don't.
I know.
No, you don't.
You don't.
Yeah, it's such a waste.
I took calculus. I don't remember any of that. Like, it's just a waste. It really is just a waste.
Well, I was going to say the reason that the Oliver DeMille book is so good is because it kind of fills in a little bit of that gap. You almost need a different book. Like the underground history of American education is so good at making you aware that there's problems.
Yes.
But then Oliver DeMille, I feel like, does a good job of saying, okay, here's the phases of education, right? You've got like this core phase, and then the love of learning stage, and then like the scholar stage, and then like the in-depth stage or whatever. He outlines these 4 phases. And then tells you kind of here's how you learn how to think, right? Here's the process.
And they're not based on age or anything. They're just based on the development. Where you are
because the first phase that he talks about, it's like he calls it the core phase, but you could probably just call it childhood phase or something, like kid phase. Yeah. And it's basically like you learn to play and you learn to work. You kind of develop the like a recognition of right and wrong and good and bad, and like some people never get that. They never. They never learn to play.
But they know how to read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They can take tests. But then the love of learning is even worse, right? Because not only does the next phase is the love of learning. After you're a kid, you should develop a love of learning. And they do the opposite. You go to school, and I'm
totally
guilty. Like when I was a kid,
I'm guilty too.
Before I started homeschooling, I was totally guilty. I hated it. And it was a huge difference for me to see these homeschoolers that... it was like, man, they actually liked what they're doing. And they're
and we had our friend on. He was talking about how the kids in his homeschool co-op that he runs, they're always upset when they have to take a break.
Yeah.
They in the summers they're like, we don't want to break. We want to stay together. And they're doing all of these things that we do as adults, but they're just doing it under supervision. That's all.
Yeah.
Whether it's, doing a play and, some people choose to do this, build the props. Some people choose to write. Some people choose to act in it, giving them the responsibility of the layout of their property where they were. Like, what are we going to put? We're going to put a playground there. And all the kids voted on it. And then the kids were putting, installing everything in the garden and doing all that themselves.
Right. And that's another huge thing, is just like trusting them to do these things, because another huge problem is that we helicopter now, and like nobody's allowed to play with, quote unquote, play with knives, but no, they actually have to learn. So how are they going to learn? Like,
that's why I like
we don't even trust kids with these machines or even playgrounds. Like playgrounds when I was growing up are like illegal now.
They don't make those anymore.
And then there's moms at the playground like staring at me because Dean's climbing some ladder that if he fell, he's going to fall on a cushion. I'm like, what's going to happen? Right. What's going to happen? And they're like pulling their kids off this ladder. And I'm like, what are you doing? You are literally preventing learning.
Right in front of us, and they're telling their kids not to do it. And the poor kids looking at our kids like, but they're doing it.
And it develops.
Oh, man.
I mean, the beauty of pursuing, and like once you love learning, right, then you dig in and you develop a depth, where I feel like that's lacking in the system. Because you become an inch deep and a mile wide in your education. So a little bit about algebra, and a little bit about chemistry and, a little bit about biology. Like you said, you forget all that stuff anyways, because they kind of teach you to brain dump. You get it out on the test and then you go on to the next thing and you forget about it. And because you don't need it.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
This is what we're gonna do. You and I and Maura we're gonna be like the Stan Efferding of education, because Stan took a concept that was very simple. He saw that people were trying to build their calories up by adding all of these different sources versus taking a few sources and going vertically. We should do the same thing. He called it the vertical diet. We'll call it the vertical education.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Give me my money.
Yeah, I've seen that.
There you go. That's
awesome. Well,
by the way, what's the name of that book, the Oliver DeMille? Because I want
one I've read is called The Thomas Jefferson Education. I don't know the guy. I think he's a president of of a college, but a Thomas Jefferson Education, because it's kind of the solution, right? It's like, okay, so you remove yourself from this situation where you're just learning how to think. How do you learn? Excuse me. You're just being in the public system. You're just being taught what to think,
what to learn.
Right? How do you teach yourself how to think, or how do you teach that to your kids, right? And there's a process, like Thomas Jefferson has been through that process. A lot of leaders have, like you talked about, all these dropouts. They've got that instilled in them. Whether they learned it intentionally or not is one question, but it's a habit of questioning. You have to basically constantly be analyzing and questioning things, and that's how you think. So there's no answer key, because there's no right answer in a lot of this. Like, the best way to do it is to use the way he sets it out is you use classics, right? And
of course.
So your kid, especially after the child stage, right, the kid stage, when they're in the love of learning development stage, it could be a classic like a song, it could be a classic like a movie, it could be a classic like a book, something that you can rewatch or re-listen to over and over again, and you get more out of it every time. That's the definition.
So art humanities, literature humanities, music humanities, just all of the, like, it's amazing to see. I mean, we have come so far technologically, but the wisdom that is 2,000 and even 1,500 years old is what we're still teaching, at least in the most elite schools, because I had the pleasure of finding myself in one of these places, and graduating from Columbia, and that was their thing. That's what they said. We haven't changed our curriculum for 200 years. I can talk to people that graduated in the 80s or in the 70s. One of them may be on Wall Street, and he majored in art history. The other one, and it's really just, it's that classical education and the Socratic method that really do. You want to talk about, that's well-rounded.
Yeah.
That is well-rounded, because we say we need our kids to be well-rounded, and the way we do it is we track and we test everything. And that's the
But that's
the
not
scores.
for the kids. That's for like funding. That's not even for the kids.
But those are the outcomes that we're measuring. That one outcome, which is a score. We're not looking at anything else that actually matters. So it's unfortunate.
And sometimes for people nowadays, like myself, right? Like a lot of my associates in the sciences, they've had bad education. They recognize that they've overcome it. And then finally, when you get to the PhD level, then you learn how to think, finally. But you could have learned that at age 12, like you could have.
I know. It's like, what a waste of time now. Thanks.
Early. Yeah. And you'd be so much.
Yeah. Because defending a thesis is definitely something that I think is beneficial. The ability to not only, defend an argument and present in front of several people and think critically, like on your feet instead of sitting down somewhere. Right. That's intense.
Yeah, that's
why I didn't do it.
Well, I mean, and even for kids, they can go to the debate classes or whatever. You can set something like that up. I mean, and then they get into a topic and they learn all about the history of the Peloponnesian War or whatever the heck, right? And it doesn't really matter what the war is. Yeah. It matters that they're interested in it, and they're defending a position, and they're learning to communicate, and they're developing skills, right? Because I think like in education, there's character, there's knowledge, and there's skills. You know what I mean? Like, those are probably the three things you're developing. So some people are weak on character, but they're real knowledgeable, or they're really skilled, or whatever combination. You want to be rounded in all of those. So you want to have, and you want to educate your kids to have great character, have great knowledge, and great skills for whatever their interest is, but not just skills, like without a depth of character.
And that's And that's the problem. When I like to, because I like to be politically correct, and I understand
you do?
the risk.
Not me. Don't worry, not me though.
Sometimes
countercultural, Danny.
Keto counterculture, Mr. Counterculture. But like when I'm actually speaking to people about, let's say, education, I don't want to hurt their feelings and make them think, well, you've been duped, and then, oh, well, what does that say about me? So I like to say that, look, it's the system. It's just not able to do what you think it does because it's a management system. And so you can't say, I want to spend more time on character with this child because I can tell that they're rude and they have bad manners and their moral compass is off somehow. But you can't, because you have to schooling. Like John Taylor Gatto talks about this, how schooling, it implies that like a school of fish, if someone's behind, you got to slow down. If someone's too ahead, you got to slow them down. You got to bring everybody together, and then you're managing them together. And that's why, the top mathematicians in the country, they're talking about how, switching to this Common Core way of doing math, which is based on making people feel comfortable with math. How is that going to bring us like
mathematicians?
The top performers. They're going to be so bored. They're going to be like waiting for the rest of the class to say, "Yeah, we think this is the answer." It doesn't award the achievers there. And
it's just the nature of the system, though. It's like not even the teacher's fault. All my best friends are teachers. It just so happens to be that way.
Literally 5 of her best friends.
But it's funny because it's like they're not all like, one of them has had experience teaching in like really, really bad schools where honestly in those neighborhoods the kids are probably better off in school. But
because we have
like, and then another friend teaches at like a private school, and then one of my friends does like tutoring, and it's like they can't even do, I'm sure, right? It's the same problems. Like they can't even do what they love. They've got to bring in their own stuff. That it's like all about the funding. Right. They can't. It's like they thought that they were gonna follow this passion of theirs, and it's almost like it's not what what you think it's going to be. Like,
I mean, if you go to the public, if you go and visit the school, and just look at the textbooks, or you just sit in the classes all day, which of course they don't let you do. But if you did, you'd just be ready.
I went to public
kill
school,
yourself.
Or just drive by a public school, and then mine looks like
a prison.
A lot of them do. They look like prisons. There's no windows. There's
my high school had zero windows. Zero.
Yeah, Boston University. So where I did my PhD, it was at the medical school at the Boston University Med School, and they have these giant buildings that are exactly like that, like little square windows if they have windows. They're big cement, just facades, really boring. And they market that as if that's like some big benefit on the brochure. It's like, come see our...
No windows.
Yeah, and it's like totally based off of the Russian, like the communist system. And they say that in the brochure as if it's some kind of a... It's kind of like...
They don't care.
It's kind of like at SeaWorld when they're like talking about how much they love the orca whales. And you're like, if you really...
Yeah. You're like, dude, no, you don't.
In love with the orca whales. I mean,
you
come
really
on.
do.
But
that's like we treat our slaves very well here. You have to see they are
exactly.
They get
We're really
meals
nice
every single day.
We feed our slaves.
And I mean that's the industrial culture too. That's the other aspect is maybe that education system was a good one for when we had nothing but factories. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, well, think about as an American, the people that were at the top of the general education board, the Rockefellers and
Carnegie.
They probably saw this. They're like, they saw that parallel between a military culture and, a culture that when history's happening right now, you're not like, this is just the Industrial Revolution. We're going to like be able to buy more capital later and make work easier. That's not what you're thinking ahead of time. You're just thinking, this is our economy and this is what we need. And, we have enough lawyers. We have enough men of letters. We don't need those. We want to keep people happy just where they are in their communities and, working, that way. And you create this culture. And, it probably happened really quick because we know that in 1900, there were still, I think it was only 30% of schools, something like that.
Compulsory schooling, yeah.
Compulsory schooling. And then by 1914, they had, I think it was either 1914 or 1918 was when all 50 states said you have to go through elementary school. That was the rule. Right. And by then, it's less than a generation.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Exactly. You've got the knowledge base a lot more than I read the book like 4 or 5 years ago, and but
Oh, well, you know what I'm going to recommend that you watch?
It's so good.
The Underground History lesson. It's a 5
Ultimate.
hour.
It's Ultimate. We always say Underground, probably because of the book.
No, we always say
it is
Ultimate,
Underground.
And now it's Underground. But if you put John Delgado History lesson.
It's 5 hours. It's nice. 5 hours. It's so good. Yeah.
You just chip away. Like on a podcast
you hear him talking slower.
Because I've seen YouTube clips, but it's so hard to, do audio on YouTube. And, my phone is always...
maybe SoundCloud.
They might have the audio somewhere,
they might have it somewhere.
I'll check.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is take the MP3s, turn them into MP3s.
Oh, you could turn it into an MP3.
YouTube,
yeah, you can. You can do it on a website. Yeah. You can convert.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, because that like the crazy thing about that is that he's spitting things out, and there's like links. Words linked on the screen, so there's references just coming across the screen, so you can literally spend. I estimate
you would never be able to go through it.
You wouldn't be able to get through it because the amount of references in that 6 hour interview, because it's 5 hours and 47 minutes.
Yeah, it's almost 6 hours.
So you think about like the historical references that he puts. If you wanted to dedicate like your thesis on education or anything, like you would have every single reference that you needed.
Yeah,
there it is, right there.
That's awesome. Doesn't
it would be really hard to get through that.
Really, he loves the scholarly.
Yeah, he's got it going on.
And the best part is that like he'll say like, let's say I think he referenced some Latin book and he got the word kind of wrong, but he's talking about
still there. He knows it
off the top of his head.
Yeah, it's like off the top of his head.
Well, I mean,
oh yeah. Well, we were digging into all of this when like Desmond was when Desmond was born. We always knew that public school was not going to be a thing, and then we quickly realized that there's not really a difference in any of the other schools. Like I had people asking me, and that was what you were talking about like ripping the children. Sorry that I say ripping. I don't care about being politically correct. Basically separating the children from their families, from their siblings as young as possible. And I remember feeling so awkward when people would ask me when Desmond was going to school and he was like 1 year old. I'm like, what? I'm like, what do you mean school? I'm like, he's 1. What does he have to learn that I can't show him? Like, he doesn't even know how to eat.
And people think like, you have to have a panel of experts around. It's like, these teachers aren't experts, number one. And maybe, and there are situations where you've got a child who's got like severe developmental issues or whatever. There's definitely cases, right? I mean, that's just like science. There's always the exceptions and, but I mean, come on, like we don't have to make stipulations for every little exception. It's like,
not at all. We would,
it's like the love of the parent is far superior to what, the love of the teacher, obviously, right? We can all agree on that. And it's like,
of course,
the parent is clearly going to have a better understanding of their child and what the child needs and how to develop a love of learning. Because again, that's far more superior than learning about World War II, or whatever kind of facts that you can learn and then forget,
And then what happens is like by forcing, like I know that like that's what happened to me. I feel like I've always loved learning, but as time went on,
you get beat out.
You get burnt out. And you're just like, I don't want to learn this because I don't care about it and I'm not allowed to, I don't have time. Well, here's the thing. You don't have time because like you said, it is very effective at chewing up all your time.
And it's a challenge as a parent, right? Because one of the strategies I was talking, from Thomas Jefferson Education, this book by Oliver DeMille, one of the strategies is you read classics, which of course requires reading classics, which is work. but I mean, again, that can be broadly defined in terms of movies or anything. But the important thing is those classics have to come from a great mind, because then there's some depth there. It's not a committee of mediocre minds putting together a textbook, which is pretty much all the publications in the public school system.
Yes.
You have to get past the textbooks, get rid of the textbooks for a lot of these subjects.
Primary.
Yeah, and you actually have to read something from a great mind and then discuss it, which is challenging again, because, these concepts, there's no answer key. There's not supposed to be an answer key, because then you wouldn't be analyzing it and you wouldn't be thinking through it, And what's really...
Yeah, but it's just it's so powerful, because when you think about like these ideas that we've evolved to nowadays, it all started with Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle, and then Hobbes comes, and then St. Thomas, and all these different ideas that like you can start putting it together. And to me, it's the most fascinating thing to see how thought has evolved over time, and you can easily. I don't know. To me, I get goosebumps thinking about it, because I love that stuff, and I really think philosophy and all those things are important.
Yeah, I mean that's how you develop this how to think process, right? And it's not conformity. I mean that's the problem with the public system, is everybody comes out the same. You go through the conveyor belt and you come out in this conformity mindset. This you've kind of known all the same facts that everybody else knows, or you forget all the same facts that everybody else has forgotten. Instead of having like an individual personality and a passion and a drive and like the great one caveat I think with the books, the great books, is that some people have great minds but they're not good. Like for example, maybe the Communist Manifesto. It comes from somebody with a great mind. Right. I mean, it's a classic, right? You can reread it over and over and get a lot of interesting aspects that you missed. I mean,
if for someone to be able to manipulate several generations and for them not to see alone that this is well, I forget the name of the fallacy that his typical fallacy is just I forget which one it is, but Marx has a very simple argument, which is basically, it's just getting, appeal to emotion. Appeal to emotion. That's what I think of with Marx, because like, if you are, let's say you're a poor peasant in Russia versus a peasant who's not that poor because they're productive in Russia, you hate the one that he really is not that much better off than you. And all of a sudden, you're all for this whole communist thing, and then you find that within a few years, your crops you starve to death because those rich peasants, the rich ones, they were killed.
Looks human nature, right? Because it's like, maybe in a perfect ideal world we could manage something like that, but we don't live in it. We have human nature, like people are. A gift and they're a blessing and all this, but you always have outliers, and we all have, tendencies to do things.
And everything works on incentives. What are the incentives to do something or to get better if there's really, if we know that the outcomes
but I mean, but like, the point is, like that's probably a great mind in the sense that, like the foundation of his argument is wrong, but most people aren't going to catch that because they don't know how to think, and they don't know how to analyze from different angles and ask a lot of questions and think through it. But it's still something that comes from a great mind. So I think in my mind, what you really want is you want something that's good and great. Like the Bible would be like the ultimate example. I like that. Yeah. So right? Morally, the Bible is probably the best example because it comes from God. It's clearly the ultimate example of a great mind, and it's a compilation, obviously, but like you can read it over and over and get different things every time you read it that are completely different, and you can start that as, we start that stuff as a kid, as a child, and then you learn the love of learning, and then you develop the scholar phase even beyond love of learning, because if you miss love of learning, you're probably never going to become a scholar, because like you're just going to hate it too much. You're going to look for ways to get away from it. But then you're challenging yourself.
That's going to be a very unhappy scholar for sure. Then you're like, they don't have the love of learning.
Well, and then you study independently and you pursue knowledge. You know what I mean? And that's what I saw when I joined this homeschooling group. Is that's what these people were doing, and myself included eventually. But my pursuits were more like in the outdoors, where I was hunting every day. I'd get up at 5:30 and get out and go deer hunting with my bow and arrow. Which nobody in my family had done. And that's why I appreciate the outdoors so much, because that's what got me into science, and that's what kind of developed my love of learning that I didn't have before then, because it just snowballs. You get into, when I was down in Florida, we were talking about bow and arrows, right? And
yeah, exactly.
And you can probably tell as soon as I start talking about that, I know a lot of weird things about bow and arrows and parallel limb technology and the riser and the fletchings and split limbs and all these crazy terms, it's because
I already forgot what you were telling me about the ones that I needed to look for, the ones that are easier to draw.
Hoyt is my favorite because they draw a real smooth back. But the most important thing is because the limbs they line up, they're parallel to each other. When they fire, the waves cancel each other. So instead of like kicking out away from you, like a normal bow that you would see is like a horseshoe shape, or not even a horseshoe, but it's more like a stretched out U. And then when you let go of the string, it fires away from you, so it kicks. But the newest ones, they have limbs that are literally parallel to each other, and it looks really weird. But anyways, like I say, like that's a rabbit hole, but that we don't need to get into, but because it's hard to describe a bow and arrow over the sound waves. But I mean, the thing is, right, is I got into science and physics because I was into hunting, and you know, somebody once told me that it's better to shoot heavier arrows, right, because you get more kinetic energy. So when the arrow hits the animal, boom, it punches through better. But then I realized I learned that in physics, kinetic energy is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. So velocity is squared. So velocity is a lot more important than the mass because you're dividing the mass by half. Does that make sense? So in other words, having a smaller arrow is actually, like a carbon arrow, is actually better because it goes faster. So you actually get more kinetic energy. But that's like such a nerd thing. Like, that's a love of learning, right? Like, that's something that I came up with by digging in because I'd been challenged, and that's what you get when you homeschool. You get a lot more.
But you were like, this is not quite what I thought it would be. Yeah. Why is that? And then you looked and you investigated and asked the question. Yeah. We both have a question. I think you
about the outdoors.
Yeah, you go ahead and ask.
Well, we all know that you're very into hunting and fishing and being outdoors, and we also agree with that. We love that. But why do you think it's so important? Like, that's one thing that I think is missing in our modern culture. But why do you think it's so important to just get outdoors and
because
do
I think it's
especially for kids
at a certain age. Kids today aren't given any responsibility. They're not, like we started off by saying, and it's good from so many angles. It's good because it's healthy. You're standing up, you're getting exercise, you're out doing something. It could be hiking. It doesn't have to be shooting something, you know, but you're getting out. Yeah. You're being responsible. You have to, it's a life and death thing. The stakes are really high. You know, even if you're just going for a hike at Mount Washington in New Hampshire or something, or wherever you live, the stakes are pretty high. Are you going kayaking on the ocean? You know, it's pretty high stakes game.
And you know that John Taylor Gatto spoke about this. He was talking about you know, the Harvard the acceptance, the people who look at, you know, the, what do you call that, the admissions department in Princeton as well. And you know, they were talking about they look at the hobbies, and
they don't actually care about I mean, they do to a certain extent.
Yeah, because they want to know what you're doing when you actually have a choice how to spend your time. Yeah. And they were talking about the importance of picking a hobby that, you know, does kind of put you in danger. So someone who decides to, you know, sail a far distance, or someone who wants to navigate around the United States by cycling around the United States, you know, you can do that as a kid if your parents are cool enough.
Well, and if it's not, if it's not, like, it depends on the age for sure. But yeah, exactly. Like, that stuff is, and it's almost innate with hunting, you know, or fishing even. But again, like, that's,
I bet,
you know, it's such a, that saying like hunting is the only way to go is like, I recognize that is too far, but I have this gene, you know, I do DNA analyses obviously, and I literally have the novelty seeking gene, which is like from both my parents plus, meaning, you know, meaning I actually, and that extends to working out too, meaning like if I do the same workout over and over and over again, not only do I get tired of it, but my muscles don't even function as well because there's a lot of communication, just like the way your nervous system.
I gotta like.
Yeah.
I must have that gene.
Yeah, we should
send my report because I don't understand.
And that's something that to keep in mind when you're thinking about training at a really high level, but also, you know, for me specifically, hunting works really well because, in the outdoors, especially because you're always in a unique situation, you're problem solving. and honestly, I get a big kick out of it, right? Like it does give me a lot of adrenaline. I'm pursuing something that's a super challenging thing to do. So, it's a pride. I get a lot of pride from it, when I finally get a moose or whatever, a bear, and so there's a lot of, there's not like a ceiling, it's not like, it's not like becoming a brewer where you like develop a real talent for brewing beer and then you become expert at it and you kind of hit a ceiling where, I've learned that, whereas in hunting, exactly. I feel like there's never a ceiling. I'm always
you're never going to be
myself and finding a new aspect to it. Like this year, I'm going to do something. I'm going to call it's netting for tulabi. They have these white fish you can actually net. They're super common, but not a lot of people know about this. Not a lot of people do it. But you go in and you string out this net, and then you come back the next day and you pick out the fish, and they're amazing for smoking. They're white fish, so they're real oily. It's kind of like trout.
Oh wow!
Ooh, yeah.
It's just and then this year I discovered that fishing for muskie at night is like phenomenal because nobody fishes at night. So these giant muskies, which literally I just like a few weeks ago I caught a 46-incher. So that's a fresh water.
Wow. See, that's amazing because we don't have any of that.
Well, you've got gar, you've got the alligator gar, which are even bigger. Yeah, and I fish for those too.
Yeah, they're freaking ugly looking fish.
Yeah, so there's always something, like
oh yeah.
Like you go to Texas, you got the alligator gar. You go, like no matter where you go or what state you're in. When I went to Kansas to visit a friend of mine, we went out for catfish. They got these giant blue catfish that get over 100 pounds. They got channel catfish. Like once you kind of develop a love of learning in whatever unique situation that is, then you dive down that rabbit hole and you get into it, and for me, that's the outdoors. For somebody else, it might not be. I totally get it. But I also feel like the outdoors, I know when we were in Florida, we talked about this other book, and it was funny because we were both like, "You've read that book? It's called Wild at Heart." And Don Eldridge wrote book for people that had never heard of it. It's Wild at Heart. And I read that one when I was in college, and it really rang true with me because it specifically describes men. And he's got another one for women too, but like for me, that was a really, that was real, in an epiphany for me to read that book and say, hey, this is me. This totally describes me because men are being feminized, and it's not just chemical. I know I talk about how men are being chemically feminized because that's what the scientific research shows. I mean, and I've had doctors say, oh no, that's ridiculous. One doctor read my book here in Minnesota, and he said, I loved every bit of it except for the male feminization. And I said, well, is testosterone decreasing? Like in the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, in the last 30?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
Is it?
Well, it's like, that's male feminization. Like, that's
there you go.
It's not a political word. It's a scientific term. It's like saying low quality food. People get afraid to hear that word when you say that vegetables are a low quality food, but when you realize the definition is strictly on nutrient density, that is by definition, it is not a political statement. It is not as high quality of a food as meat. I don't know how to put this without hurting your feelings, but it's just science. It's just, we are being feminized, and then there are arguments like that. These become arguments and philosophical points where there should be none. Like a man has certain.
I know, especially in the science world, right? It's like, come on, you're going to tell me there's no difference between men and women, and you're a scientist? Like, get out of here! I don't like. Those are the people that you can't even trust.
Seriously. You can't. You can't
true.
even. Yeah, I don't trust you anyway. So it's just, I can't talk to you.
There's no. And we're not making moral judgments here on anything. We're talking about strictly definitions. This is descriptive.
Exactly. And so once you realize, there's a difference between men and women. I mean, we even hear differently and we see differently. You probably have never seen the research, but like, for example, men see colors differently, like less than women. Probably crack you out, Maura.
Wow.
But
what would be the argument for why?
So I just feel like Danny can't see in general.
So cones detect color, right? Color and texture, whereas rods detect speed and motion for the most part. And this is a little bit simplified, but whatever. So we have the same number of rods and cones, right? So then it's like, well, I guess we're the same. But no, because the nerves connecting the cell. There's M cells and P cells. There's these other cells, M cells and P cells, that connect to the rods and cones. And basically, women have far more of those cone connections, those cone connecting cells. And
so we have better innervation for rods.
So we literally see motion differently. Like if something is moving fast, like a baseball coming at 90 miles an hour, we see that differently physically. And women see the colors of a living room in a different world. You know what I mean? Like it's the physical change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, like everything you look at, you know, like I said, the hearing is different. The adaptation to cold is different. I mean, and it's not massive differences, and you can always find outliers on both sides, right? But come on, you know, like let's not pretend there's no difference. Mm-hmm. So that's why the Wild at Heart book was so interesting to me, because hunting especially, and fishing too, and the way I do it, especially the way I like to, you know, go after all these crazy, you know, these crazy predatory fish. It really fits the description of what he was talking about. It really fits that, you know, this
that journey that we're on, and that yearning that we have.
Yeah, the adventure.
You know, you're not going to get any arguments from me. I know that some people disagree, but you know, like for me, I want to raise my boys to be, you know, virtuous men, you know, masculine, you know, and there's nothing wrong with masculinity if you're keeping the actual definition. If you want to change the definition, then of course, you know, you say something like toxic masculinity, and you know, that to me, when I see the definition, I'm like, that to me is not masculine.
Like bullying or something. Yeah. It's like,
that is not,
you know, it's not like an inherent quality.
Aggression. Not aggression does not equal, you know, like, or testosterone does not equal aggression towards another person automatically.
Right.
I think that people with, well, you would, you know, doing all the epigenetics and genetics that you're doing, you would probably, this is a big generalization, but I'm just going to say it because I'm not a scientist. So I would probably assume that a person with higher testosterone is going to be more confident and less likely to, what's the word? Just seek conflict or not. I don't know. For me, I have high testosterone, and I feel like I'm confident, and I do not. My behavior is not erratic, and I feel like if you do have that, you have
unless someone cuts him off on the road,
which I'm working on. I'm working on that.
He's working on it. That's okay. We can't all be perf.
Yeah.
Gotta have something.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Well, and so a lot of that is, I mean, most of that is discipline and just how you've environmental stuff, you know what I mean? Personality.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring it back to you, because you have a really, really, really good quote on your website. And, you know, one of our two main goals, I might have mentioned this to you when you were here, for our boys is for them to know themselves and to know what they love. Yeah. And, you know, you have Know Thyself on your website. So I wanted to ask you what the significance is to you and for your children as you homeschool them.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite quote, because I went over to Greece. I took a couple of years of Greek language and Latin too, but because I did a classics minor, which kind of connected my theology and biology degrees.
Nice. That makes perfect sense. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so I went over to Greece, and I went to Delphi, you know, the like where the Oracle of Delphi was.
The Oracle.
And what's really funny, and you may have heard this, but there's actually some natural gas that leaks in that area, some methane, and it can actually cause hallucinations and things. So they think that like this Oracle of Delphi was basically just high, and he was seeing all these weird visions in this particular building. But whether or not that's true is irrelevant, because Socrates went there, and the Oracle told him, "You're the most wise man on the planet." And he said, "Oh, I can't be, because I don't know anything." And then the Oracle told him, "Well, that's why you're the wisest man, because you know yourself. You know what you know." And that's a really important thing. And that even extends to DNA, right? Because one of the reasons I like doing DNA so much, and I like talking to other people and helping them understand their DNA, because number one, it's like a code and it's like a mystery, and you know, everybody's different. So it's not like I'm just doing the same boring thing every day. And I talk to all kinds of amazing people every day. In fact, I met your friend, who's the guy, the pitcher from the Rangers? Roland? Robbie.
Oh, Robbie. Yeah, Robbie. Yeah, he told me that he was meeting with you. I was like, that is so cool. And I think there's one of my clients has a consult with you this week.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We'll just say his name starts with the R. Yeah, another R.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't even tell people's name, but because I've doing a podcast, I've done podcasts with Robbie.
Oh, and Robbie and I think Robbie and I spoke about this on his podcast. We might have mentioned you somewhere.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Like people like that, right? Like all kinds of interesting people. They don't have to be pro athletes, right? It's just an interesting thing to help people know themselves. So even genetically, there's a component of recognizing, like maybe your iron is too high in your blood and that's genetic, or maybe you've got high blood pressure, but that's not related to your diet. It's just related to your angiotensin, right? Or maybe it's related to your nitric oxide or whatever, like a different pathway. And you can figure a lot of that stuff out. And sometimes you can't, right? And then you can say, well, that's epigenetic. And that's probably because my parents did something or I did something as a child or whatever. But at least you can tease that out and kind of figure out, where that line is. And it's all a part of, becoming a better version of yourself. Like Ben always says. What does Ben say? He says, best mind and best body or something.
Becoming. Yeah, I forget what it was. A resilient mind and a brilliant mind and a resilient body.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And that's all a part of that, because it's a depth. It's just that added layer to it. And I think, I was gonna say, I think the another overlooked aspect with homeschooling, to frame it in the context of homeschooling, is in the public school, because humans are body, mind, and soul, right? We're sitting in chairs all day, which is terrible for our body. You take somebody and you put them in a homeschooling situation, their bodies are so much healthier. They're up, moving around, they're doing things. You put them in a mental situation where it's oppressing and they're just learning what to think and not how to think. It's better spiritually. So every different level, you have to kind of learn about yourself and like, so on every level, know thyself, I think, is a really important, like you have to know your character flaws too, on a spiritual level, and and your physical and your mental, tendencies, what you prefer, what passions you have, like that's all a part of knowing yourself. And you find that through homeschooling, in my opinion, a lot better than you do in most of the public education system.
Yeah, you totally do. And, you talked about, I was thinking of my personal situation with knowing myself, right? Like if I look at my last blood work and I see there was an enzyme that was low, right? And it was something like having to do possibly with zinc. And then I would cross-reference that with my genetics. And, I don't know too much, but I'm like, well, this SNP says that I need more zinc, and that makes sense. Now I connected those two. Right. Yeah. You just completely, now I look at Know Thyself even better, because it's like he's doing it with his actual consults for the genetic stuff, which that's even better.
Yeah, that's like another layer to it.
Yeah.
And it does it's enlightening. Like, I mean, I don't know all, like, I really want to, I'm sure, the DNA thing is just like, it's kind of a rabbit hole. Once you start looking at it, and like uploading it we tried uploading it into like Prometheus. And for us, it was just like
too
so much information. It's too overwhelming. Yeah.
Well, and part of that is that's inherently the problem with a lot of these population-based studies is you find these tiny, tiny differences, and then you publish papers on it. And then the next guy comes and repeats the study, but then they don't find the difference, and that complicates it.
Yeah, and they're referencing the same one study.
Yeah.
And it's like been referenced like 1,000 times.
Yeah, no, that definitely happened.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least people are trying to some degree to tease that out. And the most important thing is to have a context and a background so you understand the enzymes and how they fit into the bigger picture. That's what I try and do. It's not 100% bulletproof, like a guarantee you're going to have a high iron level if you've got a carrier gene for hemochromatosis, but it's pretty predictable. Like a lot of that stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is so cool.
So, all right, let's go back to, well, I'll let you
I'll
give you a chance.
I want to know more about like, well, first tell us how old your kids are. And then like, I want to know like what the days look like because I see that I'm sure your wife, is the one that's mainly with the kids, but I see that you're involved, like getting them outside and doing things with them. Like how does the outdoors and like, how do you guys unschool, you know, quotations, but how does it look, you know, like a day in the life?
Oh yeah, that's an awesome. I feel like I need to get my wife down here. And
I know, go call her over.
So, I mean, oh gosh, where do I start? So we wake up in the morning. We actually go to church every day.
Yeah,
I've been doing that
nice.
since in college, actually. Even with my PhD and everything, you know, people say they don't have time. Well, it's like you can figure it out. You make a priority and you stick with it. And then, Allison does all the homeschooling stuff. But, you know, I feel like she does an awesome job. She's got that covered. But where I really try and fit in is to bring the passion into the, you know, to the outdoor activities and all this stuff, you know, like the physical stuff, because Allison gets tired. Yeah. She's working with the kids all the time. They get really irritating because we've got 4 kids and every one of them wants attention all the time.
Oh, I can't deal with 2. I don't know how 4, I would just be like so drained.
Yeah. And it can be. So then I've got to come home. And that's one of the beauties of being a scientist is I'm pretty flexible. And so I can set up an experiment, come home, hang out, do whatever, or write, you know, do some writing, stop doing writing, hang out with the kids. And it's funny because you'd think they would all be like crazy outdoorsy kids, but they all have unique aspects of it. And by the way, the ages are 1, 3, 5, and 8. One of them just turned 8. But it was 1, 3, 5, and 7, which is easy to remember. But anyways, a pretty good spread there in terms of, you know, keeping us busy. And it's almost, you know, it's pretty much just maxing us out at this point with the 4 of them.
Oh yeah, but, I'm sure you guys are like maxing.
At least you got 2 pairs. That helps.
Do you have so it's 2 boys and 2 girls?
No, it's 3 girls and a boy. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So the youngest 2 definitely hang out, and the oldest 2 definitely hang out. And they're all doing a great job hanging out and getting along and playing together. It's, you know, it was amazing when I only had 1 kid. And by the way, when my wife, we had our first child, I've had this consulting company for ages. So I was doing consulting for the U.S. government and stuff, and designing viruses and trying to make viruses that you could inject into rats and mice that would help cure Alzheimer's just as a test. So that's how I started my consulting company, basically making DNA and designing viruses. But, wow. Then I went and started doing the PhD thing, and my wife had our first kid on my first midterms test. Like the week of my midterms, on my first year of doing my PhD, and I did terribly on the test because I couldn't believe how hard it was, you know, and exhausting and all this. No sleep, and of course I recovered and got an A on my final, which I needed to stay in the program. I almost got kicked out of the program after that first midterm.
Wow.
But I guess I wouldn't have gotten kicked out, but I would have lost you get paid a stipend every year to do a PhD in the sciences.
Oh yeah.
But anyways, but once we had our second kid, it was amazing to me how great it was for them to just kind of play. And it's like you said before, Maura, with the helicopter parenting, you have to kind of just let them, you have to back off a little and say, okay, I could get involved here, but do I really need to? Is this a situation where I should be just hovering over them at all times? And it really took a lot off. Right. And now that there's 4, I mean, the oldest girl, she does the dishes and she's really helpful. And there's a lot of benefits there. But I was going to say before, it's like, you'd think they would all be just like extreme fishermen and all this kind of stuff. But really, you know, I'm trying not to force it down their throat.
They're still themselves.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They're still themselves.
Yeah,
so.
Like one of them is a huge rock climber. She loves, the 5-year-old loves climbing. Even as a 1-year-old, she was climbing up on the kitchen table, and we had to use bungee cords and wrap up the chairs tight around the table so she couldn't get on the chair, because if she climbed up on the chair and then up on the table, you know.
That is so cool to watch that personality from such a young age.
That is so funny.
Yeah, so I literally build a rock climbing wall in my house.
That's amazing.
And I have like a big mattress underneath it, because inevitably they plop off. But I've got a friend. He runs a chain of rock climbing gyms out in Boston. It's called Central Rock. Really great guy. He gave me a bunch of these holds, you know, like the little rock climbing holds. And
the ones that you nailed to the wall. Yeah.
Yep. And I bolted those up against a 3/4 inch plywood and the whole thing. So like, you know, she's the rock climber. They all have their own like things. And I try and just get excited about whatever thing they're excited about. We're doing a lot of ice skating now in Minnesota.
I bet. Yeah.
And just
that's it. You guys are officially, it's supposed to be fall here.
No, it's not anything.
But it's getting close. It's winter.
It's probably
already,
freezing
right?
already in Minnesota.
What are the temperatures over there?
But it's like I was night fishing just the other weekend, and it was literally like 80 degrees in the daytime, and then it shot down to like 40 at night.
Oh man!
It's literally has been hovering in the 40s. Right now, it's like 48 degrees, and it's the middle of the day here.
Yeah, our sitter, she's actually from Minnesota, and she was talking about how it's just like she's gonna go visit during Christmas, but she's been gone.
So cool.
She's been living in Florida for the past 3 years, so she's like, I'm probably gonna die because it's so. She's like, it's colder than anything you can imagine.
Just in the Twin Cities, so like. Yeah. I bet it's even colder in some of these places.
She says it's so
cold. Where my parents are, they're 3 hours west of the Twin Cities. So when I was growing up, I had to go 3 hours to get to the airport. And so I was way out there, and that's why it was so amazing that there were 50 families that were homeschooling. Some of them had started way back when it was illegal to homeschool in Minnesota. They just didn't even care. They're so hardcore.
They're like, that's awesome.
And just such a difference in the way that those people were. But like this last year, like literally last winter, the deer season, the archery season goes until the first of the year. And I went out deer hunting. It was -20. It was -20 below Fahrenheit.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know how you can.
And the worst part is that you're
I couldn't even live. I'm wearing a sweater right now.
Deer
it's probably
hunting,
hot.
and the thing Maura doesn't know this that you're It's not like you're moving.
Yeah,
you're sitting.
Yeah.
So you gotta be warm.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the gear that.
It's like crazy. I have like this white. I have all white. I even put like hockey tape around my bow to make it white. And
to make it all white to like blend in. That's awesome.
And I have like this white rabbit fur hat and like the white.
I know that. I know the one that you're talking about. There's one of your pictures on your website. Has you in that
in your white.
Yeah.
Get up.
Oh yeah.
Hunting, snow hunting.
It's super fun. So, it's definitely an experience when you come up to Minnesota, and it's been a while because I went to college in Florida. I got used to it too. I know what it's like to get used to that. That's awesome down there.
It really is. Not to have to worry about like what you're going to wear when you go. Let's say you want to pick up, this is dead now. There's no newspapers, but let's say there were still newspapers. You walk outside and you could go in your shorts to get the newspaper. You don't have to bundle up to get something.
It's like going into a cryotherapy chamber up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking to decrease your inflammation every day. Yeah.
All right, so let's go back because we were talking about obviously, knowing yourself, and that's a big goal.
Yeah.
And for us, like it's important to have a goal in mind, because it's so weird that it's just odd, and it's okay because in general we don't really live mindfully, and that's one thing that we're trying to bring attention to is to live mindfully. But if you really start to think about, you have to have a goal. And so what is your goal? And if you have that goal in mind, you can tailor your approach. So if to know oneself is your goal for you and your children, what are you doing? So I know that you're spending time outdoors. And then as far as like the each child, are you just observing them for a while? Or are you just kind of introducing things intermittently to see like what holds and what they like?
Is everyone working on different projects? Like, how does it? Because it's tough.
Yeah, I kind of just go with the flow. Like for example, like we have we found a trampoline park, where you go in and bounce. I take them to that once in a while. We found a rock climbing gym. We take them to that. Go skiing once in a while. Just different things. Try not to make them too. Try and find things that are free, like fishing or something, or hiking or whatever. But boating. I think the biggest thing is people, they're not looking for opportunities. They're not looking for adventure. Whereas I think I am. And I want my kids to have a good exposure to various adventures. And then when they're teenagers, and they'll be able to figure that out. I don't want to just push one specific thing. Although the rock climbing, it's so obvious that that's what she loves already. That's kind of a unique.
Yeah. Sometimes it's so obvious.
So I feel like I have to really foster that. I take them golfing on the putting green. We just go to the putting green. I used to play on the golf team. I even made the Boston University golf team. Played in college in Florida.
Did you have time? You had time to do that?
No, I didn't. I just played because the golf course was right next to my house, so I got to be able to play for free if I made the golf team, and then they got free range balls. So I take
That is awesome.
That
adds up, especially in college.
Yeah. And well, in my PhD,
especially if you're going every day, a bucket of balls every day, you can't do that's either food or balls.
Speaking of like intermittent fasting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to play golf today because I have to eat.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, take them putting green, just different things. I think take them ice skating, and I want them to be healthy and engaged and out doing stuff. Preferably outside, but like I say, out moving around. The goal.
Yeah, and
barefoot.
I think when we were
barefoot's a big one.
Oh, that
barefoot
was
all day. Yeah,
I'm barefoot right now.
Yeah, me too.
And I was barefoot in the gym today with Derek. Derek came back into town today for the first time after the Olympia.
Yeah.
I think when you were in town, I think this was a conversation that we had, and I really loved it because it does help, especially with a parent who may see as their child develops an interest for something that the child spends a month or a month and a half and then completely just throws it away. And you and I think we were talking about how that's you look at these high performers in the world, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Right? Like that was a conversation that we had, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It was us. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we started talking about homeschooling, and we were like, oh, we got to get together and do a podcast because we have so much in common. And most people have never heard any of this stuff we're talking, like barefoot. I know so many people. I probably told you this when I was there too. Like I was talking to a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. He'd never even heard of the keto diet. Never even heard of it.
Oh, wow.
And he's a doctor. And I'm like at the Mayo. And I'm like, dude, how have you not heard of the keto diet? Like some people, we overlook, we forget like some of these things that seem almost basic.
Learning
to
doesn't
us,
just end. Yeah.
That like a lot of people have never heard any of this stuff, And yeah, like some people, a lot of parents now, their philosophy is hyper specialized, right away. So they want their kid to be a professional baseball player. So that's all they're doing, and they're focused. And the kid hates it, but they're good at it, So then the kid gets in this weird situation when they're a teenager, like, well, I'm awesome at pitching, but I hate it. So now I kind of have to do that.
I've seen that play out.
Yeah, it's a strange. And then they get injured, and then of course, then they have a real crisis because they rip their rotator cuff or something, and they don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah, and they're also having probably an identity crisis because it goes back to not knowing themselves because they never had
your
the
identity
opportunity.
is that, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because when you were starting to frame the question, like what your goals are in the future or whatever the question was specifically, I was thinking basically to be like Danny Vega is kind of the ultimate,
I don't know about that.
I got too distracted.
I don't know, man.
I come to swing back to it and say it because like I think independence is really, from being in the 9-to-5 thing and being forced to sit at a desk or a cubicle or whatever, that stuff really is poisonous to me, especially. I think it is for everybody to some degree, but man, especially for me. So I love what you're doing,
Thank you, man. I'm really excited about it. We're not there. We're not where we need to be, but the journey is so important, and like it's really important, especially if you're a hard worker and you're driven to just realize that, for instance, for me, all I have to do is look back a month ago and realize like the amount of opportunities that I've had for just like when you were, I told you this, when you were at Ben's house and we were all together and having those conversations, I got to see Jordan Peterson. I've met so many people and have started doing things literally every single day that make my heart beat faster. How could that be bad? I mean, that translates physically into health.
I know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All these studies about stress, it's like, just the 9-to-5 job is stress,
real.
like these days, and people overlook that. And it's all, it's holistic. That's the beauty of functional medicine and the stuff Chris Kresser is doing, and so many people you guys are talking about. It's like, don't wait until you've got a disease and then take a drug. like have a holistic approach. It's not one isolated thing. It's a little bit of everything, and that starts from the kids right up to the adults. And, it's cool because the culture is shifting in that sense. Like I can't believe how many homeschoolers, how many people are out homeschooling. And that helps because you really do need that community. That's one thing I'm
Yeah,
Yes.
you do. You need it.
And that's why our experience, even in Tampa versus South Florida, has been different, because we were kind of like white knuckling it down there, like, you know, because there was very little.
Yeah.
But now we got to Tampa, we had no idea that this was going to be, and it's very diverse. You know, you have secular, non-secular, you know, so you can, and being as unschoolers, we get to, it's like this a la carte thing where we get to pick what we like and just avoid what we don't like.
Yeah. And I think,
and there's so many homeschoolers here.
No, go ahead, Maura.
No, I was just going to say that there's so many homeschoolers here in Tampa, and you're right. The every single year, the rates are like increasing at ridiculous rates. It's so. I mean, I don't even know what's like. It's kind of exciting because I'm curious to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 years ago, it was a 9 to 10% increase per year. Wow. And being that, even if it was just that and it stayed at that, that would still be powerful, because we have a larger group that it continues to sustain growth. You know, maybe we're increasing at an increasing rate. I wouldn't be surprised if we were. Yeah. You know, because it's the amount of people that are just like, they're realizing that, wait a second, I have X, Y, Z needs, and they're not being met. I've exhausted every single option, and I've been told there's just nothing in place for that. Right. You know, there's nothing in place for us to address that need. I'm sorry. And so you have to take it into your own hands in those situations. I
know, and it's funny because so many people, their biggest objection is socializing, you know? And what's really funny.
That's my favorite part.
And that's what's so funny to me was when I started realizing this homeschooling group existed when I was when I was in high school. I realized right away that the homeschoolers are far better socialized, because they're not just associating with one age group. It's not just 6-year-olds and then just 7-year-olds, and everybody else everybody else should be isolated, you know, everybody else is bad.
Yeah, that's so odd. And it's
that is hilarious,
awkward and weird, like to think about that.
And that's the number one compliment that we actually get, which is so funny, because when someone actually asks me about socialization, I'm like, the number one compliment that I get about Desmond is how well socialized he is. So
it's a strength. Yeah, I think so. It's a big thing that people have misgivings about, but they need to realize it's a strength. It's an actual strength with homeschooling, not to mention all the flexibility. You can travel and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's huge. And keep in mind, you know, I want people to keep in mind too, that like, you're not going to change your child. So if your child is just, however you want to put it, socially awkward, just an introvert, you know, homeschooling or not, they're going to want to be in their alone place. That's where they're happy, you know, and nothing's going to change that. And there's nothing wrong with it, you know. It just so happens that, you know, the old view of homeschool, I would put that on the fact that, going back to the fact that these children did not have the resources in place in the public school system, where they were on the spectrum, or it was some other issue, and they had to be homeschooled. So then you knew that one homeschooled kid who just happened to be awkward, but it had nothing to do with homeschooling. It had to do with he was autistic, or it was something else that wasn't a learning disability that was not addressed in school.
Right. And we all make jokes. I mean, when you're a homeschooler, you get to make the homeschooling jokes about having your pants hitched up really high and all this stuff. I mean, it comes with the territory too. You get some of that. And I think, of course, I gave the commencement speech actually for the homeschooling group graduation out in Boston. And one of the things that a lot of these groups, especially out east, what they oftentimes do, and I think it's a mistake, is they overemphasize the academic part when they get together. They have these co-ops and it's all about math, or it's all about science or whatever. And so basically it just turns into a bunch of kids sitting in chairs with one parent who's an expert at science giving a talk for a couple hours and boring the kids. But in reality, what was really, really strong about the homeschooling group I had, and hopefully, you know, a lot of other people's groups out there, it was all about social fun. It was about playing soccer. It was about playing softball. It wasn't one thing, but it was a lot of different things. But it wasn't just centered around, you know, some kind of a class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because with like an authority figure.
Because, like, you know, like when you're 12 years old, you don't need an expert in biochemistry to give a talk. You know what I mean? Like, but what you'd probably do need is a bunch of friends that hang out and go skiing and sit on the chairlift together and have a good time with big groups of people and interact with different ages. And some kids are teaching other kids. So many things there, you know, but I think that's
that intangible that it can't be. I mean, it can't be quantified really. And then, but it can be if you look at just talk to people who are really successful and you're like, wow, how were you able to break away from that thinking? It's true that a lot of people did just do it intuitively. Like Maura is the type of person that knew something was wrong. She always was like, this is not what I want. I'm not getting what I need. But in general, like you never see someone who was successful and they ask them, why did you do, how did this be? Like, how did this come to be? And you start to look at a life of freedom and autonomy and, the ability to spend their time the way they wanted. That I've never seen that, result. And I'm sure it can, because there's pathology and, everywhere in your mind, but I've never really seen that lead to, someone who's not happy, or because for us, success is tied to happiness. You could be financially successful, but if you're not fulfilled, then you're not really successful.
Which one of you two started the homeschooling? Like, before you were married, did you know you wanted to homeschool? Was it after you had kids? Was it like both one of you more than the other one?
The way I remember it, the way I remember it, and she corrected me, because the way I remember it was she was working at a law firm, and she was still pregnant, and we were thinking about, are we going to put them in a daycare because you have to work? And then we were like, okay, daycare's super expensive.
I would have had to just work to pay the daycare. I'm like, I might as well do it myself.
And she's like, well, let's stay home. And then I think both of us kind of got into homeschooling. Well, that's how I remember it.
Yeah. Really, I always felt like I wish I could be that mom that homeschooled, right? Like that's how I felt about it initially. Like I wish I had whatever fear, insert fear, patience, the whatever it is, the resources, whatever fear, right? But then just like you, well, we just did a ton of research.
Yeah, we really.
So I visited some Montessori schools when Desmond was like 2, and I'm like, this is nothing that I can't do here. And then we just kept researching. We read John Taylor Gatto. We did Murray Rothbard, Education Free and Compulsory, reading all this stuff, and you just can't. John Holt, and you just can't unhear these things. And I'm like, I can't. Knowing what I know now about education, the system, why it was created, what its purpose was, this cannot be an option for me. Yeah. And then, we followed, like, at that time, we had someone that was very influential to us. Our friend Anna Martin, she ran this page on Facebook that it's got like 50K.
Other people managing it now.
She has other people managing it now because she's busy with her own boys, homeschooling them. But she would post like conversations between her kids that she would have there, and like just everything that she was doing. And it just showed me that it was possible, that it wasn't this crazy complicated thing that I needed a curriculum and all this fancy.
Yeah, I've said, and my experience,
and then I just got confident. Yeah, and I was like, I'm doing this.
Exactly. Well, in my experience, like parents that really struggle with the homeschooling and in terms of time management and all that stuff, at the end outcome is still far superior. So in other words, like they barely accomplished anything. They barely got any school done in the day or whatever, and they still end up like far superior in high school, even in the SATs and all that other silly stuff, that people.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
It's funny because even though that doesn't matter, it still comes out.
Yeah. 20 to 30% on average on test scores. Yep. And then they looked at other things like demographics, and, they look at, a parent who spends $600 a year or more versus someone who spends less than $600 a year. College education, no statistical difference.
Yeah, it's not money.
Difference, yeah. And I see that playing out in my life, because there's some days that I'm like, we basically went to the gym. That's what I did. And Desmond is still somehow learning all types of things.
Yeah.
And honestly, with the internet now, it's become a lot easier because we don't, everything is at my son's fingertips. Like he's always he spends his days sometimes just watching DIY things on YouTube and building random things out of straws or whatever we have in the house, or drawing.
The only problem is that he needs to do a better job of cleaning up after himself.
But that's like more of a character thing. That's like more of a character thing that we're working on.
That's something that we do have to take an more active role and make sure that, look, you know, I want to eat on this table. You got pencil shavings here.
That's like my problem.
There's this stuff everywhere.
See, I just put in cabinets in my kitchen because we bought a new house and it literally just had a kitchenette. It didn't even really have a kitchen. And it was weird because they had two living rooms. They had one giant living room not giant, but they have a living room, and then you go through this little hall, and there's another living room, and it's like, hey, where's the kitchen? But we got the house.
They took it out.
Inexpensive because there wasn't really a kitchen, so I had to build one from scratch. So like right now, as I speak, I have a big quartz slab, like, you know, a countertop slab, and it's got all these, and it's like right where the kitchen table is. And it's got all these big clamps, you know, sticking out of it because I'm clamping I have an undermount sink being clamped onto it. And I'm doing it all myself. So.
Yeah, because it's much less expensive if you buy the slab and put it in. But who wants to do that? You're doing it.
Desmond and I are basically on the same page. We're working on that end of the character.
Yeah, there's that quote. I forget what it is about. You know, like some of the best minds are like very messy or something like that, or maybe it was a statistic or something that I saw.
That's probably somewhere. True. I struggle. I mean, what I do is I make
It's probably true. I struggle. I make
a total nightmare mess. Well, you've been fishing with me. You know what it's like. It's like total mess, right? Everything everywhere. And then at the end, you know, I could put it all together and try and clean up beyond what normal people clean up, because there's a stereotype that I have to fight, right? Which is like, oh, you're a hunter, so you're a slob, right? So like when I butcher my own deer and stuff, I'm trying to make it better than it was before I came in. But, you know, I try. I don't always succeed. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's true. That can get messy, I'm sure. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I think I told you that one episode.
I butcher out in the field.
That one episode of Meat Eater, which, by the way, there's a new season. I can't wait. They just put a new season on Netflix.
I know. I heard you talking about it this morning.
Of Meat Eater.
Oh, they did?
But I told you. Yeah. 6 new episodes. So
yeah, he would love that.
We're watching tonight. I just got the email about it. But yeah, that one episode where, you know, he field dresses a deer, I've watched it probably 5 times, and I've never... Was it
the one where Joe Rogan was there, or was it a different one?
No, that's a different one. This one is just him on his own, literally giving you a clinic
like an instruction
on how to do it.
Yeah, like basically butchering a deer. And he's showing you like where to cut along the, you know, which ligaments or whatever, and even showing you different ways of removing the pelt. Like basically you could do it that one way. I think I mentioned it to you. You were like, you tie a knot.
Yeah. With a rope, you can hook it up to your truck and just drive.
Yeah, that's what he did. That's exactly what he did, and it just came clean off, man. It was just perfectly separated the pelt from the fascia, and it was just like all that fascia was there, but clean, perfect. And then he just goes and you want to remove the little hairs that are left and make sure you don't want that in your meat or whatever. So it was. I've watched it several times.
Some guys, they use a blowtorch. They actually. At these meat lockers and stuff, if you get hair on it, you can actually run a quick blowtorch across the surface, and it'll just zip the hairs off.
Nice.
And it won't mess up the meat too much. I don't do that because I don't usually get too much hair. But you know, if for some reason you had a lot of hair, it's one way to deal with it.
It's kind of like me when I do a bad job of peeling a hard-boiled egg.
And you're like,
you got the shell. But what's funny when you do it with the kids is, like, my kids have grown up with me butchering animals and fish, and it's totally normal for them. Like, they don't have it's no Disney Bambi reaction, you know?
Yeah, and you know, this is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it was cool when we went fishing, and your kids and Ben's, I think it was Ben, he said like, his one particular daughter is really going to be disgusted or repulsed, or she's not going to be able to handle it. But she was right up in there saying, "Wow, cool! Can I touch this? Can I do that?"
Yeah,
you know, because
then Desmond was playing with the eyeballs.
yeah, and because you know you're out in the wild and you're gathering food, and it's perfectly normal, and nobody's overreacting about it. So they see that, they recognize that. It's just like, you know, leading by example makes a big difference.
Exactly.
That's really the biggest thing for us, is to lead by example, really, because they learn so much from that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, man, we've had an hour and 40 minutes.
I can't even believe it's been that long. It hasn't felt that long.
It has not felt that long at all. My gosh. I hope our listeners feel the same way, because this has been an awesome conversation. And like we mentioned off the air, this is really where people are going to see a different side of you.
Yeah.
No,
so sorry for anyone who came to listen about plastics. Go read the book. Go read the book.
There are other podcasts and there are other books.
Yeah.
There's Ben Greenfield. There's Ben.
You've addressed it on plenty.
podcast, and of course the book.
Yeah. No, exactly. I feel like because we're both homeschool. It's funny you mentioned Ben Greenfield. He was a homeschooler as well.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that, talking about pursuing your passions to the utmost.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, not a lot of people out there are doing what you guys are doing in terms of the independence and the having this podcast that's really holistic. Yeah,
well, that's what we really
hopefully.
We want to hopefully lead a movement, I think that, we're already past, I think we're hitting a tipping point where there's enough people to say something's wrong and maybe I want to do something about it. Well, here's your information.
Yeah.
No, that's for sure. Thanks for bringing me on.
Well, beyond, obviously, I want to give you a chance to talk about, where we can find you and where our listeners can find you. But is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap this thing up? Because we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we did. We got into
it.
No,
I'm happy. I'm happy where we left off. I mean, people can find me at AJConsultingCompany.com. It's a really clunky website name, but it's just what I've had since 2010 or whatever. And definitely with the carnivore diet, hopefully people will participate. And like I say, send me an email if you're interested in doing that, and certainly share the information with other people, especially the beginning part of this podcast, and share it with everybody who might
actually.
What
I think we can do is we can take a snip of that and put it on our story right now. Even if the podcast will be out in a week and 2 weeks or so, we'll do that now so that people can listen to that. And,
okay, cool.
And that is simply just to email you
email me, AJ@AJCCo.com. And honestly, you can find my email pretty easily online with my consulting company if you can't remember that off the top.
And then your Instagram is pretty simple, right? It's Dr. Anthony J or Anthony GJ.
Anthony GJ, yep. Just because everything else was taken.
I know, the struggle.
Yeah, it's real.
Well, thank you so much, man. Do you mind staying on for a minute as soon as we stop recording?
Of course, yep.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Can't wait for our listeners to hear it, man. Thanks again.
Yep.
Thank you.